they looked around and they found a store for rent in a big building in a building that was a drugstore and offices. The drugstore was a wedding gift from the man's folks who owned the biggest drugstore in Buffalo. So Mother and Dad met these people and told them what their problem was. They were Irish Catholic, lovely, lovely people, and they said, sure, move in here. This would be nice to have a nice little dress shop here. So that's how we ended up there. It turned out to be the most wonderful place they could have moved, because we lived in an apartment. We couldn't afford anything else, so that they went to business every day and I could walk to school. And after school, I always went to the store. I didn't go home. I had no home to go to. And I would go to the store, and my dad had built a little fitting room in the store, so I'd practice my violin in there too. And my dad, incidentally, who never took lessons, had a great ear for violin, and when I practiced, he'd take my violin away and say, that's not the way you play it, and he'd play it perfectly. He was a natural. I didn't get that talent, but I kept playing, and as a matter of fact, when I went to elementary school, we had an orchestra, and we played for the assembly every Friday, and I became a concertmeister. As bad as I was the only one that played the violin. So my mother tells a story that every Friday we had assembly, and she'd get me dressed up for assembly, and she'd have me in a starched skirt, you know, the little skirts the girls wore. And when assembly started, the concertmeister stands and gives the tune for everyone. And I would stand up, and Mother said before I'd sit, I'd lift my skirt up so I wouldn't squeeze it. And everybody laughed, and I didn't know what they were laughing about. Anyway, that was my entrance, and I always have loved concerts since then. Matter of fact, when we moved to Boston, we always went to symphony. So things connect. Anyway, I loved that school. There were only 2 Jewish kids in the whole building, and all our teachers were young, beautiful Irish women, and in those years you could not teach and be married. So they were all unmarried, beautiful women. And after I'd been there a little while, I guess this was in 2nd grade, one of the teachers came to me and said, Sylvia, we know that you are Jewish. You know, every Friday we have a reading from the Bible. Kids alternate, but we would like you to use your Jewish Bible. When I went home and told my folks that, they couldn't believe it. My goodness, what a wonderful school. As a matter of fact, ever since then, when I belong to the chorus here, when we have Christmas songs, no one ever wants to sing Adeste Fideles, but I sing it because I think of those teachers. Things hang on. Look at that, I'm tearing up. The past does add to you, doesn't it? Anyway, so my folks had their little shop, and Mother had all these wonderful rich ladies come and get their clothes made. And sometimes they'd say, I want you to go see a movie. Look at the dress she's wearing in this scene. I want you to copy it. And she did. She made beautiful, beautiful things. And across the street from us was a Catholic school for deaf children. And the sister in charge of the building came across to Mother one day and said, would you be willing to teach some of our kids how to sew, so when they leave they would have a profession? And Mother said she'd be glad to. Of course, she'd have to pay them a little bit, but you know, if they were going to do some work for her, she'd love it. She'd love the idea of teaching. Well, she had a lot of customers and a lot of teaching to do, and she had 2 girls come at a time, And after a while, they'd switch and send another 2 girls. And after a while, now what was my father doing? He had no profession, and all he could think of was connecting cleaning to the dressmaking. Well, at that point, my story jumps around. The war had started, and my husband, who comes from Boston, had been was graduating MIT, and MIT asked all the guys who had not accepted any jobs yet to consider going to one of 3 cities. They need to build airplanes, and they were offering them Long Island and California and Buffalo. And a bunch of the boys who lived in the area wanted to go to Buffalo because it was closer to home. As it turned out, it was like a United Nations. There were Italian boys and Irish boys and Greek boys, wonderful group of guys. And I knew them all because looking for a place to live, a man who worked in the drugstore in our building all week on Sundays worked where Curtis Wright was. And the guys came out of getting the jobs, checking in at Curtis Wright, went across to the drugstore, and they were saying, where are we going to live now? And of course, Mr. Cooley, who heard everything, said, oh, I've got a great place for you to live in a nice neighborhood. There's a doctor who owns a huge house, and she has no family there anymore, and she's very patriotic, and she would love to rent to some of you boys. So that's how these MIT kids moved in our neighborhood, and it turns out my husband was the only Jewish fellow in the whole group, and we were the only Jewish family in the whole neighborhood. And he shortly found his way. My folks laughed. He brought a pair of pants in to have cleaned, and he kept coming in and saying, well, I'll pick them up tomorrow. Anyway, it was just an excuse to speak to a family that he could connect with. And he and I just fell completely in love with him. I was a freshman in college at the time. He had just graduated. And my father said, he's just fooling around with you. He's too old for you. Anyway, it didn't work out that way. We really hit it off. And that was just lovely. We got married my junior year in college because we were afraid he was going to have to go into the war. He was in the ROTC, but the government came and then said to the fellows, you can stay here and keep building the planes, but you'll have to give up your ROTC, which means you won't get any of the benefits that you thought you would get. So here we were just getting married, and he said, of course I'm going to stay here. Well, a whole bunch of the guys did. But while we were talking toward the end of the war, people started saying, where are you going to live when the war's over? Well, of course, most of them wanted to go back home. And one of the girls said, oh, I want to go back home to Massachusetts. My family has a beautiful summer home in Sharon, Massachusetts. No one had ever heard of it. Where is Sharon, Massachusetts? Anyway, she talked so lovingly about it that when Saul and I decided that we were moving to Boston because he wanted to go back to MIT and do graduate work, which he had never gotten to do at the beginning of the war. So he got into MIT again, and at which point he had a great career there. However, his advisor said to him, you're top of your class and you got in without taking any tests, but I want you to know that you want to be a civil engineer. That's the worst thing for you to do. They won't hire any Jewish kids. Do something else. And this was not a Jewish man, but he was a good advisor. Well, my husband said, but that's what I want to do. if they don't want me because I'm Jewish, I'll find someone who does want me. So he stuck to it. We were married my third year in college on the basis and understanding that that I would continue school. Otherwise, my folks didn't want me to get married. So I did go back to school. I was the only married person in my class, and there was an older woman in the class, and they kept calling her my name because I was younger. You know, it was funny. It got to be a joke in the school. Anyway, I went to the State University of New York in Buffalo, and I studied child psychology, and I always wanted to be a teacher. That's what I played as a child, teacher all the time. So there was no question in my mind. I loved working with kids. And I did finish my class. I graduated, and that year I became pregnant and had my little girl. And Diane was born, and she was a delight. She was a little talker, and she didn't want to walk, she just wanted to talk. We tease her about it to this day. Anyway, so the war ended, and we made a decision to go to Boston, and I was an only child, so my folks were heartbroken, but they felt this made sense. You wanted to go back to school. So we had a little green car with a rumble seat. I couldn't remember the name of it. And we all packed up, my little girl and my husband and I, and we trundled off in this little green rumble seat car all the way to Boston. We lived with his folks for a couple weeks. They wanted us, they had a 3-story house and wanted us to move in, and we decided that was not for us. And then we got the apartment in Winthrop. And that was, the year got so cold and we had to go looking somewhere else, and we remembered Sharon. So we thought, spring is coming, let's go see what this place is. So we got from Winthrop through Boston, all the way up Route 1. That was all country, not a store on the whole road. And we thought, my goodness, what are we getting into? We finally got to Sharon, and it was heaven. Right from the moment we saw it, beautiful little town, beautiful little houses, right on a lake. And lo and behold, we got there at the end of summer when all the people, the only Jewish people living there at that time, had summer homes there, which this girl had been talking to us about. And they were all renting them. All of a sudden, all these little houses were being built, and the kids coming back from the war were looking for places they could afford, and a lot of them moved to Sharon. And the fact that there was a summer group of Jewish people living there, the town has, I think, a church for every denomination in the country. It's lovely. Not only a church for every denomination, but they all lived happily together, and they had this little Jewish temple that was built for the people who were there in the summer, and that attracted Jewish kids there who had a reason to come to the town, besides the fact that it was so lovely. Anyway, when we got there, we were welcomed, of course, by the little Jewish community, because they were happy to see all these young people moving in. And as I said, the town was so friendly. We all got together for holiday occasions. I have 3 children. The first one was born in Buffalo. The second one was born in that little bit of time we had in Winthrop, when we were looking for a place in Massachusetts. And the third one is our son, who was born in Sharon. Well, we became very involved with our little temple, and my husband was on the building committee, of course, and helped them design the enlarged big building. I became interested with a group of women in the women's group at the temple, and we never hired people to come in and cook. We'd all go in the kitchen and cook luncheons, and we had weekly meetings with the rabbi, learning about the Bible, and we'd have lunch. And during the holidays, at one point, I became very interested in the League of Women Voters, and at one point, I became president, and we decided it would be a wonderful thing at Thanksgiving to invite foreign students in Boston to come out to the country. And we had, every student had a family that they would stay with, and they would spend the Thanksgiving weekend. And all the churches in the temple all got involved together, and they had services at each of the places. It was a wonderful weekend. We had a young man from France who was lovely, and it was a marvelous weekend. And the League did a lot of things, and it was at that time that the League decided it would be nice for us to bus students from Boston into the beginning of that whole period, the black students from Boston into Sharon, and we'd have each kid have an associate kid in Sharon that would be his family, and they could stay after school and know that there was a family they'd be with before the bus took them back. That was a great time, and there was a lot of, you can imagine, discussion about it outside of the city, because people in Sharon were very, very much in favor of doing that at that point. And that was a fine thing that we all got involved in. I ran for school committee, and lo and behold, I got elected. And Herman Richardson was a wonderful, wonderful superintendent then, had built up a wonderful school system. And that was another thing that attracted the young people there, knowing that Sharon had a very fine school system. And I must say, my 3 kids got a wonderful education there. On the school committee, there were just 2 of us who were Jewish, and all the rest of the committee was not. And the question came up, brought up by Richardson himself, that he was noticing that there were a lot of little Jewish kids coming in the school system, and every holiday there were Christmas carols and Christmas trees in every room and in every building. And don't we think it was time that they introduced a little Jewish music, a little Jewish art, even a little holiday? Anyway, the superintendent brought it up, and we said, that's a good idea. I mean, this is America. So he called a meeting of the school committee, and we decided to okay this. And the newspaper that week had a headline, and the town blew up. I never knew there was a person in that town that was anti-Semitic. And I got night calls in the middle of the night, if you don't like it here, get out. I thought I'd never hear that in that town. Well, the news of that came out, and that wasn't the town. There were there are always 1 or 2 people like that. Anyway, the superintendent called a big town meeting in the high school and got the whole town together to talk this out. Let's not have it brewing. And the town was so completely for opening up the town, they couldn't believe that anyone would be against it. And there was a unanimous vote. Let's make all the people who come here feel that they're part of the town, and let's open it up for all our kids. Let's teach them what we want them to know about America. that was one of the proudest moments of my life. Time magazine sent a reporter to that town meeting. They were sure we were going to blow up, and instead they got that unanimous vote. And there was an article in Time magazine about it. Anyway, that was one of the hot moments of my life. But anyway, after that, the school committee, since I was a faculty wife, oh, I didn't tell you that point. Northeastern called MIT to see if they could recommend someone to come over to Northeastern and get some life going into their engineering department. It was nowhere. They were in a little dinky building, and my husband had a little dinky office. I mean, I have to tell you how small it was, considering what's happening to Northeastern today. Anyway, this professor who had wanted so much for my husband not to become a civil engineer recommended he go over, and Northeastern took him, and it was a very comfortable fit. He was a wonderful leader, and he started with a couple people in the department, and slowly they built it up. They did all the things that they had to do to get the curriculum going. He stayed there until he retired. He had a wonderful career there, made a lot of friends, got an honor society going there. He always wore a bow tie to school, and the students thought it was funny. Every year the freshman group that came to him thought it would be a big joke. When we go to class this week, let's all wear a bow tie. And they thought this was original, and my husband always put on an act, oh, I never saw such a thing. But he loved it. And we now and then invite students out for a picnic in Sharon, but it was sort of far for them to go, so we didn't continue that too much. But he loved the young people that he was hiring, and they loved him. And it was a very, very good, happy time. And when it got to the end of his career, and they asked him if he wanted to be dean, and he said that, he was ready to retire. But those were very happy years.